Marie Tidball, the new MP, newish MP for Penistone and Stocksbridge, elected at the last election for the Labour Party. There's so much that I've learned about you by reading about you, but you've been quite prominent in your campaigning. There was this old interview that you did, and one line that you said in this interview, it really jumped out at me. Your parents were told that you wouldn't live long. How old were you when this happened? What were the circumstances?
So the circumstances was that was the day that I was born in Barnsley Hospital. Although they had pre-birth scans for mothers at that stage, they weren't very detailed. So my parents didn't know I would be born with the disability that I have. And so the day that I was born, it was quite a shock. And they were told by the special care baby unit nurses and the doctors that helped deliver me that I wouldn't live very long. And that was really upsetting for my parents and for my family. But the absolute love and joy that my parents had for me being their first child, and they are both extremely bloody-minded, determined people. They were just going to make it work and love me and look after me for however long they had me. And that attitude of, there's no such word as calm. They've absolutely woven that throughout my childhood in terms of their expectations about me and what I could achieve, and the kind of support that I should be getting in order for my disability to not be a barrier to my life and my life chances.
Tell us about the disability you have.
So I was born with a congenital disability, which affects all four of my limbs. So I have 4 shortened arms with a digit on each hand. I had an amputation of my right foot when I was 11 months old because that only had 4 toes on it and it was twisted. I've had a great number of very complicated surgeries on my legs throughout my childhood, which meant that I missed 3 years of school and which had quite a big impact on my life, having to go in and out of school and get used to making friends again. And then I'd have to have another big surgery. And that happened throughout my childhood. And it was my state education in Penistone, where I grew up, that meant that I caught up and fulfilled my potential and was able to go on to university.
Tell you what we do. I do a lot of these interviews. I love doing these interviews. Yeah. And we often talk about MPs and the adversity that they've overcome in life. But my goodness, I don't think I've met anybody who has overcome I was about to say challenges. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say challenges. But I suppose for me, disability is not about the person themselves being disabled. It's the social model of disability. It's the barriers that are there in society and how you remove those barriers so that the disabled person can fulfil their potential, whatever that may be. And I think my parents, they didn't really know about that model, but that is how they brought me up. How are we going to get over this challenge? How are we going to enable you to do this thing, whether it's trying to challenge me to learn to play the piano, which of course didn't go very far, or like getting my first belt in karate, or being able to swim, and all the expectations that they had of me growing up was that I would be able to, they would find a way to enable me to do the thing that I wanted to do.
And you have achieved more, and obviously they are wonderful parents than, well, the vast majority of people who grow up and want to succeed. Everybody wants to do well. Every mum and dad wants their kids to do well. But my goodness, you've smashed every challenge that's confronted you.
I've never seen it as about comparing myself with other people. I think it's always been my parents giving me that real fight, to get things right and get things done in my life. And it drives you all the time and gives you that determination, because when you've got a very visible physical disability, that's the first thing people see. So you spend so much of your life overcoming people's expectations about what they think about you. And that can be really hard. You walk into a room of new people that you don't know, and you're aware that even if it's just a glint across their eyes, that they've noticed that and they've clocked that. And there's a whole world of assumptions that come with that. And you have to learn very quickly the skill to put people at ease and to overcome what people perceive and expect about you. And that can be exhausting and really draining. But it's something that I've had to do to get in the room and to be heard in the rooms that I've been in. And I very much therefore feel that duty and obligation to be doing that for other disabled people that are stood behind me. There's 14 million disabled people in this country, and I want us to be creating a country that treats disabled people with dignity and respect. And I feel a duty and obligation to be part of doing that.
So if somebody with a disabled person is watching this and thinks, gosh, well, if she can do it, I mean, Debbie Blunkett, you referenced him, he went before, who was blind, who is blind. There have been others who have gone before you. But what would you say, what's the advice that you would give to somebody who thinks, can I do that? I mean, Parliament, look at the ridiculous building that it is. Can I move between two places, my constituency and Parliament?
So
I knock on doors every week. That was the party keeps insisting I do.
The first thing that I'd say is 100 years ago, we had Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was disabled, a wheelchair user, President of the United States. There is absolutely no reason. I grew up with David Blunkett, who was in the seat next door to mine, who our family knew a bit, who was a Home Secretary, who was Education Secretary when I was at school. There is absolutely no reason that disabled people shouldn't want that if that's their ambition. I would just say, as disabled people, we have to solve problems all our lives. And for me, fundamentally, politics is about solving problems. And so disabled people bring an exceptional skill set to the table as politicians, and taking very difficult, complex situations that they've faced in their lives and finding ways to overcome that, working with other people, having to learn to advocate for yourself, because sadly you have to do that all the time. Those are incredible skills as politicians. So I would say if people want to do that, they should pursue it. And it's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy. It is really hard and it's really challenging, because often you're having to outperform a lot of your contemporaries and your colleagues because of the assumptions that people instantly make about you when you have a disability. But, our politics is richer for having a variety of diversity representing us. And we know that 20% of the voting age population are disabled. I want to see more disabled people in Parliament. I shouldn't be the last and only one, and I'm certainly not. And I think we have, in this Parliament, we set up the first disability Parliamentary Labour Party, which has never existed before. And that is a growing group of people that are saying, actually, are, if you like, coming out as disabled, saying that they've got disabilities that are maybe hidden, that they've not talked about, but bringing forward that more positive culture about talking about disabilities in public life and in politics. And
so do you have meetings together?
Yes, so we do. We only set it up in late November, December time.
And it's a Labour group so it's a group of Labour MPs who have either visible or non-visible.
A whole range of different disabilities, a range of different physical disabilities, but also people that have got mental health conditions, that have got neurodiversity. There's a real range represented that would reflect reflect the general population. But, with 650 MPs, we ought to make sure that there's a higher percentage to reflect the general voting age population that are disabled, the 14 million people out there in our society that are disabled.
Big debate going on at the moment in your party, which is proposing to cut some disability benefits. How do you feel about that when the proposals were presented?
I've said very clearly that when we're talking about growth, we need to be talking about inclusive growth. And that means that the social model should be at the heart of that. So everything that we do in government should be about removing barriers to disabled people. And that we know that incentive-based systems massively outperform those that are punitive or that are cuts-based. There's some really important work in what's been announced. So our 1 billion programme on getting more people into work, our youth guarantee programme, and also what we're going to do to make sure that there's a try before you buy system, so that disabled people aren't punished for trying jobs and then them not working out and
that's
taking
all the
off
good
their
stuff.
Benefits. And on everything else, the party would expect me to use my 15 years of skills and experience in understanding public policy making to analyse that very closely, to look at what disabled people or organisations are saying. But most importantly, listening to my constituents, which I'm doing, and I will be holding events in my constituency to hear what they think the impacts are. We're in a 12-week consultation period. I will be gathering all those things together, and I will be feeding that back through that consultation process to the party, as they would expect me to do. Because they know that's my skills and experience. And there's no good having a backbencher that has that skills and experience and not wanting to look at those things very closely. And I am constantly engaging with the department and the Minister for Disabled People on this issue, and I will continue to do that throughout this period.
And it sounds to me like you will make you may try and improve the proposals, and you will make your decision. As you know, I know a lot of Labour MPs. I know there's a lot of anxiety on those benches. You'll make your decision depending on whether all the things that you fed in can be reflected to ensure that disabled people aren't harmed but are helped by the proposals.
Well, for me, it's about making sure those proposals deal with the 14-year legacy that we've seen from the Tories, which is a 29% employment gap for disabled people, a 17% pay gap for disabled people. And I will be looking to the extent to which those proposals collectively and individually help to deal with that and reflect our values in terms of inclusive growth that I set out at the beginning of our conversation. And I will be feeding back where I think things can be improved and where more work needs to be done, because ultimately I want our country to have successful growth, and disabled people need to be a part of that. And it's how we do that effectively.
Very clear. Now, you're a mum.
I am,
proudly. As well as an MP. Recently, you've spoken out about the challenges you found as a disabled woman going through the pregnancy, the childbirth, and after your healthy baby daughter was born. Can you just give us a summary of those challenges that you faced in the process?
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing, my first appointment I had with my midwife, I knew that it was difficult for them to take my blood, because normally you would have your blood taken at that first midwife appointment. Your viewers will know who had babies recently or otherwise, that's a really important part of the care. And I said, will you be able to do this? And she said no, so she rang the phlebotomy unit. And I had to keep describing my disability to her. And I said, well, I've got 4 shortened arms and a digit on each hand. And I kept on repeating it. And I then realised that I was in the middle of some kind of Two Ronnie sketch, because she thought she was looking for the 2 other arms, basically. And I just realised at that point that this person, who was relatively newly qualified, just hadn't got the language to understand how to talk about my disability and to kind of think about how that would intersect with my pregnancy. And then I changed very quickly to a more experienced midwife who was nearer to where my home was at that time. And she was brilliant. And while she hadn't dealt with many mums like me, she really wanted to help get me referred to a consultant midwife who could talk to me about my birth plan. But those things just didn't happen. And they didn't happen quickly. And I did ultimately go and see a registrar obstetrician. And when I went and saw that obstetrician, they said, I was talking to them about natural birth, and I said, do you need my x-rays? And they said, oh no, can you lie on the bed? This is fully closed. Can you open your legs? And so I was there, with them. And I was just like, there's been literally academic papers written about the surgeries I've had done on my hips, and you're asking me to do this in a way that doesn't give me any dignity and respect. And there was just that real lack of understanding, again, about how my own physiology, my skeleton would interact with my ability to have a natural birth. And there's just no understanding about that. And it was only when I developed something called obstetric cholestasis, which is entirely unrelated to my disability. I'm sure, again, some of your viewers will have had that. It's where your skin gets really, really itchy in pregnancy, right, and it can lead to stillbirth. It was only when I got that I ended up seeing a consultant obstetrician who was amazing, who then referred me to the consultant midwife and basically marched me up to her office the day before I was going to be induced. And we talked through my birth plan, and we talked about, given my hips and physiology, what my birth should look like. Probably there'd be a lower threshold to caesarean and various other things. I did end up having a caesarean because the induction didn't work and my baby became distressed. But no one had thought about how that would impact on my mobility, because I use my stomach muscles loads. And obviously when you have a caesarean, they slice through your stomach muscles, and you just, it took me a lot longer to recover from that. Having had that. So it was a real frustration that there was some brilliant professionals and that were really wonderful and really did their best, but there was just an absolute lack of knowledge about how my disability might interact with my pregnancy and my maternity, and both giving birth and then afterwards, and what support I might need to be able to breastfeed and to carry my baby, given how much I relied on my stomach muscles and that they were destroyed by the caesarean. And that was really frustrating and very surprising to me, as someone that had a lot of confidence at that time, and the experiences I had really destroyed that confidence.
So you're campaigning for change to ensure that other women don't face the same challenges that you did by this wonderful thing of having a baby. Parliament's funny, isn't it? That, it's like a law. Is there a law that you think, right, West Streeting, I want you to do this, and this would make it better for us?
Well, there's lots of things. So we want to make sure we set up a committee of disabled women and professionals to build a specialism, so that we can then use that to make sure we put in place better clinical guidelines and also training. 2.9 million disabled women are of reproductive age. That's 20% of women who are of reproductive age. So it's a high number. And I know from conversations that I've had with Wes and his team that they are going to be doing a women's health strategy as part of their follow-up to the Darcy review. And very much what I want this and the inclusive high-quality maternity care for disabled women to be part of that. And then what we found with the research was that of the 30 clinical guidelines, the NICE guidelines that are out there, none of them deal specifically with disabled women during pregnancy, during birth and postnatally. So we want to see a piece of NICE guidelines on that to specifically look at how we can improve care pathways for disabled women who are going through pregnancy and birth and then their postnatal care. And also what reasonable adjustments are needed to doctor surgeries, hospital facilities, so that they can be better included and access those spaces as well. And then the third element is to make sure we've got more training for obstetricians, gynecologists, but also, crucially, midwives as well. So this month, I'm going to be working with the Royal College of Midwives and giving a presentation to them about this and doing a workshop with them about how we could develop some education and training for their midwives. So things are already moving quite quickly.
Good. Now, speaking of reasonable adjustments, let's talk about that building that is Parliament.
Yeah.
Not just sort of, it's a palace, so it's not a normal place of work. Yeah. The hours are not normal, but that's just how we do things here. Is there a magic wand question for you or answer from you? If there was one thing that you could just wave a magic wand and change about how Parliament and politics, how we do Westminster works?
So I think when we do things more inclusively for disabled people, we do things more inclusively for everybody and all MPs. And I want more people from a bigger range of backgrounds to come into Parliament and to know that that place belongs to them too. So it will benefit everybody. I spoke and gave evidence at the Modernisation Committee a couple of weeks ago. And some of the key things, so there's not just one thing, but some of the key things are making the chamber more inclusive for disabled members to contribute. So at the moment, if you want to make a speech, you won't necessarily know when you're going to be called. So you could be sat there for 6 hours, which for people with different physical disabilities like mine or longer term health conditions like diabetes, that can be really, really challenging. So we want to look at ways to change that and emulate more what's already happening in the Lords, where they will have a better idea about when they will be speaking. Absolutely, people should sit there and listen to others. We want to be part of that debate, but it's just about making the timescales more manageable.
There'll be those traditionalists who go, but this is how we do things here. This is our wonderful Parliament, and we sit there, and you don't know when you're going to be called to speak, and you have to sit there, and just to tell viewers or listeners, you actually have to ask to go to the toilet if you want to nip out because you're desperate to go to the loo. You have to ask for permission so they know you haven't technically left the chamber, because if you do, you lose your slot to speak. Yeah. But there will be those people who say, well, it's worked all right for hundreds of years. Well, what do you say to them?
I would say this is about having the best quality debate you can have. And when I was sat there waiting 4 hours to get called to make my maiden speech, I was knackered and I wasn't really on my best form. Yeah. And that doesn't enable really good quality speaking and people representing their constituents at their best possible self. And that's true of everybody who's an MP, not just disabled MPs. But I also would say, as I did at the committee, that we've had the Equality Act that was passed by that palace, by that place 15 years ago, that said we had an anticipatory duty, which just means that they should anticipate, they should predict where there may be barriers to people being involved in public life and being engaged, and doing something, making reasonable adjustments to remove those barriers. You know, we should honour that 15 years later and make sure that those changes actually happen and make that space much more inclusive.
Yeah, so just so I understand, you're basically not having to wait, having some clearer idea of when you will be called to speak.
Yeah, that's the simplest thing, yes. Absolutely. And then there's some things around voting. You know, we've got a reasons room. I want that to become the reasonable adjustments room. So where people can't go round and round the roundabout when you're physically voting, could they sit there and could there be a yes and no mini lobby within that? Yes. So people can sit there, and you could have whips in there overseeing that to make sure that was all done properly.
So to have a sort of separate, there's that separate sort of room attached to it.
There is, yeah.
Just by the corridor that you go.
At the end of the lobbies.
I know exactly
and so that people that find walking very difficult and
you can sometimes be walking, just to explain, you can sometimes be walking round and round in a circle for two hours.
Well, if you've got 10 votes...
15 minutes a vote.
It's 15 minutes a vote. That's a really long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, if people have got arthritis, we've got a growing ageing population, that's a good thing. You know, we know that largely that the older people end up being MPs because of the careers and things that people have. And that's great. But that does mean that you have to take into account that they may well have more health needs as we have a growing number of our older MPs as well. So this will benefit everybody, not just disabled members, and make it more inclusive for everybody. And there's some really easy wins that I talked about that we could do, and knowing when you're likely to vote, knowing that there's somewhere you could go to wait to vote rather than going round the roundabout too many times, and also not having to wait so long to speak would help massively.
Final big politics question. You're in favour of assisted dying. It's a big hot topic at the moment. There will be a vote. It went through on what's known as the first debate. It did pass with a reasonable majority. You sure you're doing the right thing? I abstained, so I chickened out of this one, and I thought I just can't make my mind up, so I didn't vote.
So, as I said in my speech at second reading, it was a really hard one for me, and I didn't think that I would ever reach the point where I would vote the way that I did, but I thought about it really deeply, and it was a moment from my childhood when I had surgery when I was around 5 or 6, Sheffield Children's Hospital, and my skin was itching with the amount of morphine that I had. Had been in so much pain, and I turned to my parents and I said, I want to die. I asked them, to die. And that situation both told me that if the bill was about pain and suffering, which it's not, you can only apply for this if you have got 6 months terminal condition at the end of life and you've got capacity, and that I think is absolutely tightly drawn as it possibly can be and is right. So I wouldn't have voted for anything more broadly, but having that pain that I had at that moment gave me an insight into how I would want to live my death as well. And I would want to have that choice and control at the end of my life, where I only had 6 months left to live and I had capacity to choose that death if in those circumstances, that's where I ended up. But also, I had so many constituents write to me to tell me their stories. And so although it came from very much a place of conscience and my lived experience, it was underpinned by what my constituents said that they wanted me to do.
You said to your mum and dad, I just have to go back to that because it sort of sent shivers down my spine. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I really remember it very vividly.
How old were you?
So about 5 or 6. It would have been when I had...
In Sheffield Children's Hospital, you say to your mum, oh my gosh, imagine being the mum and dad who hear that from their beloved daughter.
Yeah.
God, they're saints. And to deal with that, it's a tough thing for them to deal with. It's a tough thing for you to deal with, obviously.
Yeah.
Gosh. I mean, looking back, I hope that was just a moment.
It was a moment, and I think they were very good at talking to me about the pain that I was experiencing. And I had a lot of pain in my childhood, because I'd had an amputation. Every time I was poorly, my stump would get very sore. And that would really ache, and so I wouldn't sleep very well. And my mum in particular was very good at comforting me, but I had lots of conversations with my dad about thinking about my pain and how you kind of I suppose, think beyond it and try and manage that pain and manage your relationship with that pain. And that's a very different and difficult thing for a child to do. But that has given me a really helpful skill set, because I have pain throughout a lot of my, my time, and I'm used to kind of managing it and I suppose not letting it get in the way of the things that I want to do.
Mary Tidball, we've had a good chat there.
We have.
I could listen to you all day, and I actually think your mum and dad need a shout out as well.
They definitely do, yeah.
So I'm going to give them a shout out too. It's a genuine pleasure to meet you, to listen to you, and I reckon you'll deliver the change that you want on those campaigning issues that are so important to you and your constituents.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.